Hey, what's going on, guys? There is a clip of Conor McGregor circulating around where he confirms his return to the UFC this summer against Michael Chandler. And there's really two different types of people reacting to this news. There's the people like me that's like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And then there's the people that's taking this news and running with it as if it's set in stone. And when I saw this clip initially, I thought, you know what? Conor McGregor's tune has changed massively over the past couple days. If you've seen my two prior videos that I've done over the past couple days, which I will have linked down in the description, the tune from this interview to those interviews has drastically changed. So what has changed between Conor McGregor and the UFC? I have my theories. We're going to take a look at the interview because when I initially saw this clip, I went and sought out the source material for it, the original source of the interview, and I couldn't find it. But then about 20 minutes ago, I finally saw the original interview, which was just released on ESPN MMA, and I went and watched through the entire thing so you don't have to. And there's a lot more information in there than I ever thought was going to be in there. Now, half of it's about the movie, but the other half of it, Conor's offering up contract information without even being prompted. I could not believe my eyes. Now, I want to jump right into it, and we're going to start off with the clip that really doesn't have to do with, his contract. It doesn't have to do with fighting this summer. It doesn't have to do with Michael Chandler. But there's been a lot of speculation recently about Conor and alcohol, Conor and drug abuse, just Conor and substance abuse in general. And I don't know if he's tired from the promotion of his movie Roadhouse. I don't know what's going on here. But this is an 8-second clip. After I saw it, I'm like, you know what? I have to put this in my video. And by the way, is it just me? You guys have to let me know down in the comments. Every time I see Conor McGregor, I feel like his face looks different. And it's the same thing for this interview. So this first clip that I'm going to show you is honestly a bit strange. To be honest, let's let the clip speak for itself. Listen to this.
Couple of sidekicks to that from I won't. There's a lot of there's action on yachts and on. So I was on sea as well.
Did anybody understand a word that he just said? If anybody can translate that, please let me know. Now maybe he's tired, maybe he's just stumbling over his words. But with all this speculation about alcohol abuse, substance abuse, when I saw that, I'm like, what was he trying to say there? I have no idea. And then he goes back into kind of flowing okay. And the rest of the interview was mostly fine. But I just thought that was crazy, and I figured I'd share it in the video. Now, this next clip, we're going to jump into, basically he's asked, and you'll see the tail end of the question, when is he going to return to the UFC? This is the question that's been on everyone's mind. And the answer that he gives, and honestly, he kind of goes into a long-winded spiel, and I think there is a chance, and I'm going to go through my theory in a little bit, that Conor McGregor could be potentially trying to strong-arm the UFC, which could work out, it could not work out, but there is definitely a tune change for Conor McGregor from previous interviews, one which was released yesterday, where he seems super frustrated with the UFC, and now he's acting like everything's changed and he's gotten a phone call from the UFC. But let's listen to this.
When do you think that might be, and against who?
Yeah, we got confirmation a few days ago that it's all systems go, and the Notorious will be returning in the UFC octagon this summer.
With the wink at the end. He'll be returning this summer. Now, there's a chance. Like, if I'm Michael Chandler right now, I would feel a little bit better about this, because in a second, Mark Raimondi asked him, are you fighting Michael Chandler? And we'll hear that in a second. But one thing I don't like is the wink. That could mean nothing. But when this initial 30-second clip, it was around this time period of the interview, when the initial 30-second clip got released, there was one sentence in here that was kind of not in that clip. I don't know whether it was edited out or was purposely edited that way, which gives me even more pause about whether or not Conor McGregor actually fights this summer, and we'll see it in a second. But Mark Raimondi's going to ask him, are you fighting Michael Chandler? And listen to Conor's response.
Summer. That's Chandler, Michael Chandler?
By the way, you can even see Mark Raimondi's shocked that he said this, because Conor, he probably expected a non-answer, or we're waiting to hear back from the UFC, and all of a sudden Conor's confirming that he's fighting. But I do want to pump the brakes on this a little bit. Conor released a video in January saying he's fighting, and fighting on June 29th. So for the Conor McGregor fans, the people who want to see him return, I want to see him return as well. I wouldn't get too excited. I mean, look at Mark Raimondi's face. By the way, ESPN's a multi-million-dollar company. And is this 480p? Are they buying all their employees the same camera, or is he just borrowing Brett Okamoto's camera? 480p. I can just barely tell he's shocked because the quality is so bad. Multi-billion-dollar corporation. But he just asked him, "Are you fighting Michael Chandler?" Here's Conor's response. Michael Chandler might have just put out a cigarette, popped out his Creed CD.
Yes, Michael Chandler, yeah.
185.
Oh, he's so up,
As you
yeah.
announced.
Now look, see this. It's Chandler. I got to shut up, Michael, you imbecile. The blade doesn't shut up. But see him on Raw and all. I like Mike. I'm gonna bust him up. I'm gonna bust Mike up, yeah.
Honestly, Conor is naturally funny. He's like, I like Mike, I'm gonna bust him up. But it is funny that he mentioned he saw Michael Chandler on Raw, so maybe that call out worked. He's got one dude on his mind. But it is funny. He's calling Michael Chandler an imbecile. He wants to, shut him up, which Chandler has been doing a lot of talking, but fair enough to Chandler. He's been wasting 2 years of his career, or almost 2 years of his career, waiting for Conor McGregor. And now Conor says he's going to fight this summer. But there's a sentence he says next. Listen very carefully to this next sentence he says, because I think it kind of, it makes me kind of, whoa, it kind of makes me think, all right, is he really meaning what he's actually saying, or is there something else going on here? And I'll break down my theory here in a second.
So if I say it, I do it. If I don't say it, if I say it, it gets done. End of. And put that in my stone. And so Chandler in the summer. Wait, we're having a bit of laugh. I was having a bit of laugh with the 180.
Okay, so he says, if I say it, it gets done. Michael Chandler in the summer. Well, wait a second. You're saying it's a done deal already, and now you're saying if I say it, it gets done. Now, if you're not familiar with what the UFC does, and this is a good comparison to what maybe Conor might be trying to do right now, and this was my initial thoughts when I'm watching this interview, the UFC will announce a fight. Typically not a Conor McGregor fight, but they'll announce a fight. For example, Paulo Costa versus Ikram Aliskerov for, I believe it was UFC 291. They'll announce a fight, and the parties that they have announced, the fighters, have not signed a bout agreement or agreed to the fight. And the reason they do this is to pressure the fighters into signing the contracts, because you're already setting fans' expectations. The fans expect Paulo Costa versus Ikram Aliskerov. The fans expect it. This is previous. I think this was for 284. Paulo Costa versus Robert Whittaker. This is what I'm talking about before they actually fought. The UFC announces these fights to put pressure on the fighters. Is Conor McGregor doing what he did earlier this year in January? Is he essentially promoting the fight against Michael Chandler? Has he had enough of the UFC at this point, kind of ghosting him and not giving him any information and beating around the bush, that he's announcing it on an ESPN MMA interview to get the fans excited? Because everyone's posting this clip, everyone's talking about it, everyone's tweeting about it. And is he hoping that he can strong-arm the UFC and Dana White into making this fight because he's already set fan expectations? Now, typically I would say no fighter could do that to Dana White in the UFC. But if one fighter could do that, the only fighter who would be able to do that would be Conor McGregor with his drawing power and his star power. Now let's listen to some more of this, because in a second, in a little bit, he gets into his contract. Not quite yet. He goes on to a little bit more about fighting Chandler and whatnot. But in a second, he offers up information about his contract when not even being prompted about it, which was crazy to me.
I haven't checked the scales, Mark, since the last time I weighed in at a UFC event, which is a fair bit of time ago.
By the way, shout out to Mark Raimondi. I know I always crap on MMA media. Mark Raimondi, when he realized Conor was kind of talkative, he just started firing off questions. When are you going to return? Will it be against Michael Chandler? Is it going to be at 185? And Conor's kind of answering about that. I know I cut it off and kind of went on a spiel there, but the last question was about 185.
So I'll have a chat and I'll see where I'm at. But I got great news. It's all systems go. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Got the call. Everything's sweet. I hit the gym. I went, obviously I had me camps in Dubai. I had a camping can. I was preparing, and then I was kind of getting nothing back. So I was kind of, and then other things would have come up. So I kind of dipped out. But now it's on. So there's no messing now. I cannot dip out now. So straight away, I have a full scale UFC octagon in my home. I got a guy up.
By the way, that was a little bit of a weird edit there. So I wonder what he said there. But either way, he's saying, I got the call. Everything's good. Everything's sweet. Everything's set up. That's a massive tune change from the interview he did with Talk Sport. Again, go watch the video I did a couple days ago where I cover the interview of Conor McGregor with Talk Sport, where he's saying, the UFC's not talking to me. They're not giving me any information. Now he's saying, I got the call. Everything's sweet. Everything's good. I think there's a chance. I've kind of a multitude of theories, and I'm going to sum them up after we get finished looking through the clips. But one of my theories is, and again, I'm just speculating here. I'm trying to give you guys my best educated guess because a lot of people are wondering what's actually going on here. I'm wondering if Conor McGregor, in the promotion of this movie, he's shown to become increasingly more frustrated with the UFC. I'm wondering if there was a phone call from Hunter Campbell, from Dana White, trying to smooth things over. And maybe while it didn't pinpoint exact details of what's going on, they told Conor, we're going to get you a fight this summer. And I think a lot of people are running with the date June 29th. But let me remind you, summer is technically June 20th to September 22nd. So don't be surprised if Conor doesn't fight till September. Don't be surprised. But let's listen to the rest of this because there's some more very interesting details in this interview. And by the way, I will link this full interview down in the description if you want to check it out for full context. Also, guys, do me a favor. If you enjoy these videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.
We had a full straightener, a full fight, just to see, just get that going. And camp has begun. The train today done a cycle around Times Square, or not Times Square, what you call it, Central Park. And I done pad work in the park, myself and my...
By the way, the first thing I thought of there was Nate Diaz. He's playing touch butt in the park.
Boxing coach Philip Sutcliffe is over here, and also Raj Renew was here, another coach of mine. So we're training away.
So there he goes. He's in a training camp already, supposedly. Which is, that's a massive tune change. But we're going to get into more of why I believe, or what's going on here in a second. And then, kind of unprompted, it's not necessarily unprompted, he goes into essentially his contract details. He goes into his contract details. He talks about potentially re-signing with the UFC. He talks about the UFC approaching him to re-sign. And all Mark Raimondi, I cut off the question, but all Mark Raimondi asked him was, what's next? What's next for Conor McGregor? A very generic, easy question. And Conor seemed to offer up a lot of information. And it was very surprising. And honestly, I didn't expect it at all. Listen to this.
The kind of team. So I have 2 fights after my UFC contract. I'm excited to get them. What's next? I don't know. I have not been accosted by, there's been no talk of a re-sign. I don't know how would you even approach someone like me to re-sign? What would that look like? I'm sure
that is very interesting. I find that hard to believe. And this is what makes me lean. And again, I'm kind of reacting to this in real time. I haven't really had time to really sit down and really think about, a million different ways this could have gone. But I'm almost thinking, I'm wondering if Hunter Campbell called and smoothed things out a bit. And Conor's trying to douse cold water on the flame that the UFC's icing him for contract reasons. Because you can tell, and I talked about this in my previous video, and it's so crazy that this interview came out today. But I told you, eventually we're going to get a bullying point. They're either going to get it resolved or they're going to go even further apart, and there's going to be kind of getting crappier and crappier and take negotiations public. But I just find it very interesting that now all of a sudden he's offering this up. I have not been accosted by the UFC and asked to resign. How would you even approach somebody like me? But I find this very interesting nonetheless, and he talks about it a little bit more. I was shocked how much he goes into detail about this.
Thinking about it, if Lorenzo probably would have been at me door 2 fights ago, maybe to re-sign me. I'm 2 fights out now, so I don't know what way they're gonna do. So I suppose maybe they might want to just see how things play out too. So I don't know, and more fighting, and I'm excited. I definitely have one this year, and I'd love to. I called for the September one also. I suggested Diaz. I think that's perfection, and
at the Sphere. Right.
At the Sphere, Mexican Independence Day. I think that's an absolute perfection of a fight.
I wonder, and I talked about this in a video from months ago. Conor tweeted out something like UFC 300 and it's a done deal. And I speculated back then that Conor could be saying, look, let me headline UFC 300 and I'll sign a contract extension. Throw that in to kind of sweeten the pot. I'm wondering here if Conor's kind of throwing that out there as well. Throw in the Sphere, let me headline the Sphere, and that'll sweeten the pot. I'll sign a long-term deal because there's no way. The UFC doesn't need Conor McGregor. Let me make that very clear. But the UFC does not ever in a million years want to let Conor McGregor go elsewhere. And he has 2 fights left on his deal. They're going to try to do everything to re-sign Conor McGregor. And at the end of the day, Conor McGregor, and he goes into it in a second, he loves the UFC. He's been with the UFC forever. They've built him into the superstar that he is. And he's always seemed very kind of against potentially going against the UFC head-to-head. Even when he's very frustrated, it seems like he holds back. But listen to this. There's a little bit more where he talks about it.
And let's see how it goes. I'm sure I get one in. I'm hoping I get two. And then after that, do we sign a new deal? Do I go? Am I a free agent? I love the UFC dearly, Mark. That's my heart is in the UFC. My catalog, my life, and I love everyone in the company and all the fighters and all the events and all the shows and cards. And I wish to continue this. How that looks, I have no clue. And then as far as movie.
So there you hear him. That is crazy. I mean, that is night and day from the interview that he did the other day or yesterday. It released yesterday, but it was within the last couple days. I love the UFC. I want to resign, but I don't know what that looks like. I have 2 fights left. It seemed like this is a guy kind of struggling internally with what's going on with him in the UFC. And honestly, I think it comes down to basically 2 different scenarios here. We don't need to watch any more of the interview. Again, I will link it down below if you're curious to go check out the full context of it. But I think it comes down to 2 things. Basically, maybe Conor McGregor hasn't talked to anyone yet. And maybe he's just trying to set public expectations, like I mentioned earlier, to put pressure on the UFC to book this fight. Maybe the UFC is trying to ice him. Maybe the UFC is trying to re-sign him. And he doesn't want to take, because once you take negotiations very, very public, it becomes harder to negotiate a deal because then someone kind of looks like shit in the whole deal. And this could be a situation. So you could have that where Conor's just trying to put a little bit of pressure and play the game that Dana White plays. If anyone could do that, it's Conor McGregor. He's smart enough to do that. And also he has leverage to do that. But the other thing that could be, and honestly, what I would lean towards at least right now, ask me tomorrow. I mean, Conor McGregor is going to be on the MMA Hour. I'll probably do another video if there's pertinent information from that. But the other potential situation is the UFC has noticed that Conor McGregor has become increasingly more frustrated in different interviews that he's done when talking about his UFC return. And he's kind of said a couple things where it normally wouldn't matter if it was this fighter or that fighter, but being Conor McGregor, it's getting a lot of attention, where he's saying, I haven't heard anything from the UFC. I don't know what's going on. I'm frustrated and this and that. And I wonder if somebody, Hunter Campbell, Dana White, whoever, called Conor McGregor or his agent and smoothed things out and said, look, we're going to get you a fight this summer. Now, that may not be June 29th. That may be July. That may be August. That may be September even at the Sphere. I'm a little disappointed to hear Conor say, I'm going to at least get one. I mean, remember a couple years ago when Conor's like, I'm going to have a season. I'm going to fight 4 times. Conor McGregor, I hate to say it, I feel like he's done. No matter what, he's done. It's like he's never going to be the guy he once was. And I already knew that for a while, but just hearing that, you know what I mean? Like it's 2024 and he's talking about, I might get one this year. And then he even goes on more in the interview and you can watch it yourself where he says, I might do 1 fight, 1 movie. So that's going to be like maybe 1 fight a year. But I think there is a chance that somebody from the UFC called him, smoothed things out a little bit, told him, look, we're going to get the ball rolling on a fight. We'll get you a date soon. And that's why Conor McGregor has kind of changed face a little bit. And it's kind of the Dustin Poirier situation where Dustin went public saying, I'm not fighting at 299. The UFC called him, rectified the situation. Then Dustin kind of had to cover his tracks and say, it was just a miscommunication. I think that could be Conor McGregor right now kind of saying, I love the UFC and the UFC hasn't bothered me to re-sign a new deal. No, not the UFC at all. And, he even says if Lorenzo Fertitta was still here, he would have, bothered me 2 fights ago because typically the UFC doesn't like to let big stars and notable fighters like Conor McGregor fight out their deals. So I think really those are the 2 most likely scenarios, either public pressure, kind of like a chess move from Conor McGregor, or secondly, they smooth things out. If I'm Michael Chandler, I would feel a little bit better about it. He still waited out a long time, but maybe he does get the fight this summer. But don't be surprised if it's not until September. Don't be surprised if it's not June. Maybe it's August. We will have to see how it plays out. At the end of the day, any pay-per-view that Conor McGregor headlines will be a massive pay-per-view. I will continue to cover this situation. Again, there's an MMA Hour interview from Conor McGregor that's going to happen tomorrow. I will cover that on the channel as well. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Let me know what you guys think is going on down in the comments because I haven't had enough time to fully think about this and fully process this. I wanted to get this video out quickly and react to it quickly. But I think those were the 2 most likely scenarios. But I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. I'll talk to you guys in the next video, and thank you so much for watching.